Hi there, I'm Renos Vakis, lead economist at the World Bank, and your host for Accelerating Development Ideas for Impact. This is not your typical podcast. It's an AI powered conversation brought to you by the World Bank Institute for Economic Development, where we unpack the latest research with one goal in mind turning big ideas into real world impact. Let's get started.
Thank you for the introduction, Renos. Well, it's great to be here for our show today. And, we're really diving into something pretty crucial right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the global economy, it's facing some really significant headwinds, and they're largely stemming from increased trade tensions and heightened policy uncertainty.
Hmm. Increased trade tensions, you say. Can you elaborate on that a bit more? Like, what exactly does that mean for global growth?
Sure. So, the global economy, it's really running into turbulence. Forecasts, they're indicating that this current upheaval, it's going to slice nearly half a percentage point off the global gross domestic product, or GDP, growth rate that was expected at the start of the year.
So it's going down to 2.3%, you mean? Like that's quite a drop, isn't it?
It really is. That performance, well, it marks the weakest in 17 years if you exclude outright global recessions. And looking ahead to 2027, global GDP growth is only expected to average about 2.5% in the 2020s.
Wow. So that's like the slowest pace of any decade since the 1960s then. What's contributing to this kind of slowdown?
Well, the current US average effective tariff rate, it's actually at levels we haven't seen in almost a century as of late May, and that's a big part of it. Measures of global trade policy uncertainty, they've also reached historical highs over the past few months.
So a lot of uncertainty, a lot of trade barriers, but is there is there a silver lining? Like what happens if these trade disputes get resolved?
There definitely is. Our analysis suggests that if today's trade disputes were resolved with agreements that have tariffs relative to their levels in late May 2025, global growth could actually be stronger by about zero point 0.2 percentage point on average over the course of 2025 and 2026.
That's interesting. And speaking of tariffs, what about developing economies? Do they have, the same kind of tariff situation?
No, not quite the same. Most developing economies right now, they tend to have far higher tariffs than high-income economies. And if we could convert those preferential trade agreements into deep trade agreements that span cross-border regulatory policies, that too could really boost GDP growth.
So, reducing trade costs sounds like a huge win. Was there any historical precedent for this kind of positive impact from, trade reductions?
Yes, actually. Trade cost reductions between 1995 and 2020, including those related to the World Trade Organization or WTO accession commitments, those boosted global real GDP by nearly 7% over the period. And for low income countries or LICs, it actually led to growth of over 30%.
Fascinating. So trade is obviously a big piece of the puzzle, but I know fiscal health is also a concern. What's the situation there?
Yeah, moving on to fiscal order, it's pretty clear that a succession of economic shocks in the 2020s has really strained government finances in many developing economies. Fiscal deficits in these economies, they've averaged nearly 6% in the 2020s, which is the highest level this century.
And that means debt, right? I heard interest costs are a big part of that.
They are. Interest costs alone, they account for about a third of these deficits. In low income countries, the budget squeeze has been intensified by a drop in foreign aid, which typically finances a significant share of critical needs like healthcare.
So, if foreign aid is dropping and debt is rising, are a lot of these low income countries in trouble?
Unfortunately, yes. More than half of low-income countries are now either in debt distress or at high risk of it. And it doesn't help that developing economies, they collect far less in revenues than high-income economies do, about 25% of GDP compared with nearly 40% in the wealthiest economies.
So, fiscal deficits, um, they're still above pre-pandemic averages, and debt levels continue to rise. And I hear that interest payments are expected to stay elevated across LICs, remaining about 10% of fiscal revenues by 2027.
Precisely. That's why national policymakers, they really need to strengthen fiscal positions by raising additional domestic revenues and reprioritizing spending. This means broadening the tax base, strengthening tax administration, and improving collection to reduce tax avoidance and profit shifting.
And what about subsidies? Are they part of the fiscal picture too?
Yes, they are. Significant gains can also be reaped by narrowing the focus of costly food and fuel subsidies, channeling them instead towards low income households. That could make a big difference.
Hmm, that makes sense. Now, let's talk about jobs because I know that's another big challenge. What's happening with job creation globally?
Oh, it's huge. A historic demographic shift is underway globally, and it's really intensifying the need for jobs in many of the poorest countries. For instance, sub Saharan Africa's working age population is forecast to almost double by 2050.
Wow, almost double by 2050. That's over 600
Th-
million more people, right?
That's right, over 600 million. And South Asia's working age population, it's expected to expand by nearly 300 million, while the Middle East and North Africa's will grow by more than 100 million over the same time frame.
So the jobs challenge, is it particularly acute anywhere?
Yes, it's particularly acute in sub Saharan Africa, which accounts for two-thirds of the world's population living in extreme poverty. In almost all sub Saharan African countries, the expected average annual growth in the working age population between 2025 and 2030 is set to exceed the average annual employment growth seen over 2010 to 2019.
So the pace of job creation isn't keeping up then.
It's not. The pace of per capita income growth in emerging market and developing economies, or EMDEs, projected at 2.9% over 2025 to 27, is actually about 1.1 percentage points below the 2000 to 19 average. And that's simply insufficient to boost job creation and reduce extreme poverty.
And I heard that if you exclude China and India from those EMDE figures, that pace is even slower.
That's true. Excluding China and India, this pace is even slower at 1.8% over 2025 to 27. So structural reforms are just essential to enhance institutional quality, stimulate private investment growth, develop human capital, and improve labor market functioning.
And for countries affected by conflict, what's key for them?
For those EMDEs affected by conflict, achieving lasting peace and stability, it's paramount for raising employment, human capital, and income levels. It really is foundational.
Well, that's a lot to unpack, but it's clear that trade, fiscal health, and job creation are truly global challenges. Thank you for that very insightful overview for our show. Over to you, Renos.
Thank you for joining us. You can find the full report on our website. Just follow the link in the description. Be sure to subscribe to be the first to know about upcoming episodes. And before you go, how do you plan to put what you learn into practice? And what topics you'd like us to explore next? We'd love to know. Until then, goodbye.